I am Siddharth Jha, manager at Center for Mediation and Conciliation, which is an initiative of Bombay Chamber of Commerce. And today I have the privilege of speaking to Mr. Ashok Barat, who is the past president of Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Hello, Mr. Barat. Good morning.
Good morning, Siddharth. Good morning, Siddharth.
Sir, now Bombay Chamber is hosting its 184th annual general meeting, and it has been around 8 years since you stepped down as the past president of the Bombay Chamber. Now, definitely a lot has changed, and specifically, we have seen unexpected and uncertain events in this year. Now, discussions around reviving the Indian economy has been going on, such as the measures taken under the Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, I would like to get your views on the way towards a resurgent India. What, according to you, has been the impact of COVID-19 on the economy? And can you discuss some measures that are being taken or should be taken to revitalize the economy?
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you for this opportunity. It is a pleasure to speak to the Bombay Chamber and its members as always. The COVID-19 is a black swan event. I don't think there is anybody present in this room or probably present anywhere in the world who has at least the intellect and the physical capability to remember anything of this kind to have happened during his or her lifetime. So we are also left without examples. The second thing which is very unique about this is that everybody is groping in the dark. The doctors are groping in the dark. They don't know the behavior of the virus, the cause of the virus, the prognosis. And therefore, all the others, whether it's the government, the economist, the businessman, even the common man, is faced with a huge degree of uncertainty and unpredictability. In such a situation, all parties, I think, need to be very reasonable, sensible, and mature in their responses and expectations. This is not the time for either a rhetoric, and therefore, if I make any comment on the government, what it has done or what it needs to do, I think it has to be appropriately reserved and considerate, given that we are all sailing in the same storm, maybe in different boats. The second thing is that whilst we certainly look forward to the government to support the business and ameliorate the hardship, a large part of the solution also lies within us. And the business ecosystem cannot shed its responsibility of also changing the way it works or doing things differently that will help ameliorate the hardship. So I'll try and attempt this question in two ways. One is what the government can or should do, and what the business people should do. Let me start with the government first. I think the greatest expectation or the most commonest expectation we all have is that the government will make credit liberal, will cut down taxes, spend money on infrastructure. These are all taken as given. I think the greatest support that the government can do to business is just playing its role as a fair party to a commercial contract by keeping its part of its commitment going and without indulging in things that we see of delaying payments, raising frivolous disputes, which ultimately get overturned in the long run. They have to simply make sure that wherever the government is a purchaser of goods and services from the private sector or from the business, any business, not just private sector, they should pay on time, they should not raise frivolous disputes, and keep their part of the bargain. I can assure you that if the government plays its fair part as a party to a contract, a large part of the problem will be taken care of. Because today the problem is not just P&L, not just cash flow, it's a combination of both. Simply granting extra credit or moratorium could turn out to be the antibiotic that ultimately has a greater side effect than the cure itself. So that is my first submission to the government: be fair as a party to a contract. The second is that this is also a time where it is possible for the government to take more disruptive and bold steps in reforms. This is not the time for only tinkering. And there are two reasons why I say it. First and foremost, I think this is, and I'm not trying to propagate it in a surreptitious way, but people are now willing, because of the circumstances, to accept far greater disruptive changes, which otherwise civil society, opposition, the other parts of the political system would have not accepted under normal times. Sometimes a crisis can be a great opportunity to push through a lot of things which would have otherwise been unacceptable in the course of a public narrative or in the course of public acceptance. The second dimension of the government reforms will be that it is not only about policy and regulations that they need to change. A big part of the government reforms or the government process is unfortunately whittled down and completely curbed by very grossly complicated processes. This is also the time to simplify government processes in dealing with business. It is not just the policy or the regulation, but the way it is implemented by the government at the lowest level, at the policy making level, at the approval level. I think there is a case for improving the government processes and making it more efficient. So reforms has two parts. One is disruptive and the other one is on processes, which is sometimes which is completely ignored. Coming to the business responsibility, as I said, when you have to be fair, I think a lot of it has to happen at the business level. First and foremost, I think the larger units, those who are well off, big corporations which buy goods and services from MSME, they also have to be hand-holding their vendors and being more fair to them and a little more considerate to them. So whether it is giving a price increase, paying an advance instead of sticking to the contract terms of only paying after 30 days, helping them invest, improve their quality. I think there is a big part that larger corporations can help their smaller vendor base, MSME vendor base, to remain profitable, and in fact, in today's situation, maybe even survive. So it is not only the government giving credit, I think even the larger corporations, because unless the small scale sector produces, the bigger industries will not have the goods that they can sell or the services that they can sell. So it is, I think, in enlightened mutual self-interest that both the parties have to play. Second, businesses will have to look at changing their business model. This is not the time for dogma. This is not the time for living in the past. Digital businesses, changing the last mile supply chain, growth of e-commerce, use of technology and data analytics for making yourself more competitive. I think these are many things that businesses will also have to look at investing, and it just can't be business as usual. And last but not the least, it's more of a social dimension. Businesses will have to accept that consumers will buy or take the money out of their wallet only if they have confidence and cash. Cash alone in a situation like this is not enough to encourage a person or a consumer to take out his or her wallet. When a business terminates employees, they are actually killing consumers. May not be their own. In fact, their own customers may get killed by or eliminated by some other business taking a similar step of terminating employees. This is a time for sharing hardships. Simply taking down a poor and taking away their economic power to purchase is taking away the cash and confidence built. And whilst you may think that, the employees that I'm terminating are not the people who buy my goods, but we don't realize that we live in a closed ecosystem. And therefore, if you do something for somebody else's consumer, somebody else will do it to your consumer. I think there has to be a greater understanding and sharing of hardships. So this, I would say, is a sum and total of what the government is doing or should do and what the businesses should do. So it has to be a handshake that will help the country pull out of this crisis.
This was about the impact and the measures. Now, as India is emerging out of these difficult times, how can we improve the competitiveness, maybe to stimulate ease of doing business and making India attractive for global business?
A very good question, Siddharth. There are making India competitive in manufacturing in particular, and services we are already fairly competitive. So I'm going to focus more on manufacturing for the time being, because that's where the public narrative is actually focused currently. It has a number of dimensions. I'll just pick up a few. First and foremost, it is my belief that whilst we should pursue big ticket investments, we should equally focus our attention to medium-sized companies who are looking for an India entry and who have products that fill gaps in our existing manufacturing value chain. So, in other words, if something is manufactured in India and there are some inputs that are currently being imported, these are the items that we should focus on and preferably source them from medium-sized enterprises. The advantage of this is a ready market for the manufacturer who comes in, and just-in-time availability for the purchaser, reduction in forex exposure, better working capital management, and so on and so forth. And that ultimately it can also become a source of exports. The reason why I'm focusing on medium enterprises and who are parts of our integral value chain or string of pearls, as I call it, is that the big boys will require a huge amount of wooing before they come. They will demand large tracts of land. They will demand, expect a large amount of fiscal incentives and a whole host of other things that will make their investment here attractive. Now that puts us in a competitive rat race. There are other countries which probably have deeper pockets to provide this. For example, for us, providing land is a very big issue. So, if you need 200 acres of land versus 10 acres of land, it makes a huge difference to the possibility and probability of getting that unit going. Secondly, some of these large big boys will also get wooed by their own home country. Not just wooed, sometimes even threatened by their home country because of the growth of economic nationalism. So therefore, whilst I'm not saying that we should not pursue them, it is good to pick up the low-hanging fruits of smaller enterprises for whom India entry is aspirational. And given the fact that their products already have a market in India, or at least the item that the manufacturer has already a market in India, and the need for it, we would be able to get them out quicker. And last but not the least, smaller enterprises, it's easier to spread them across the country because they need smaller land parcels and smaller people. And therefore, you can also create a more dispersed regional growth and promote the growth of the logistics industry. So there is a huge amount of benefit coming from encouraging MSME both domestically as well as from a foreign country. And some of them can actually even form joint ventures with their MSME counterparts. Second, I think India's reputation suffers greatly because of unstable policy. It's not that we don't have a policy, it is that it is unstable, unpredictable, and sometimes frequent changes completely end up destroying the basic ethos of that policy in the first place. And sometimes it is done for a very innocuous reason, that we are plugging a loophole, we are clarifying. These are the typical words that are used whenever a change is made, that we are making a clarification, there is a procedural change, there is a loophole. But the way it is worded and the way it is done, it completely destroys at the very roots of the policy in the first place. And that often is a huge, huge setback for foreign companies. At the end of the day, they're culturally different, and for them to suddenly get used to this is very difficult. Third, I think there is need for a greater coordination and harmony on items that are on the concurrent list, that is both union and state. In the last few years, in the last few months, particularly last year and a half, we have seen whenever there has been a change in the political setup in a state, a large number of contracts have been cancelled. So we have gone back on our contracts. The central law and the state law, the process and the procedure are so different that even though there is a uniform federal legislation, the way it is implemented across the state, so if a company has got, or a manufacturer has got 15 different plants or 10 different plants, you need to have a completely different ecosystem for handling the process, including setting up, and now most of them are computerized. So you need to have so many instances in your ERP just to take care of the compliances across various states. And last but not the least, which is of course Siddharth, your and my very favorite subject, I think people are not only looking for good execution of the law, but also quick resolution of the law. And the speed with which we deliver justice or redressal is very, very important. I think nobody has a complaint about the fairness of our system. People have a complaint about or the people don't have a complaint about the quality of our system. People have a complaint about the speed of our system. And therefore, ADR mechanisms have to be encouraged both by law, by policy, and by practice. And mediation certainly can be one of them, because when you are dealing in a cross-cultural context, I think keeping the amiable relations becomes even more important, because they're culturally different. At least in India, you can reach out to another person once in a while. You can go through somebody and rebuild a relationship. With a foreigner, it is even more difficult. So, once they go away, they will not come back. So it has to be a more benign and genial form of dispute resolution, which is quick, fair, and creates a win-win rather than creates some very extraordinary precedent of jurisprudence. So this is, I think, some of the things that I believe we could do to improve India's competitiveness.
Absolutely, sir. My last question now. How can trade bodies like Bombay Chamber of Commerce contribute in the process of reviving different sectors?
Yeah, so a chamber like Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is 184 years old, known for its credibility, pedigree, integrity, quality, intellectual capital, and fairness, both as a person seeking help from the government as well as giving back. I think that's what makes Bombay Chamber a little different from many other chambers. We don't always go and seek. Our request for seeking something is always accompanied by what we are prepared to give. And that's what makes us unique. So there could be many ways, but I will speak of just few, four to be precise. First and foremost, I think, we all participate in policy changes. Absolutely. So that anytime the government comes out with a draft, we respond to it fairly well. But I think we should participate in two other things. One is reviewing the impact of the policy and the effectiveness of the policy and giving feedback to the government. That's one thing that we should do, which we don't do. I think, from time to time, we should research and assess whether a particular policy has worked or not worked and what could be done to make it different and more effective. And the second one is, if there is a change that is proposed, I think we should do almost like an audit, if I may use that word, to make sure that the change does not take away or destroy the spirit of the policy in the first place. And that's something that I referred to earlier as well, because change management is often ignored. When something new comes up, we all jump at it and then we try and do something about it. But when a subtle and a discrete change is quietly slipped in, there is no public participation and there is no public scrutiny of it. I think as a chamber, we need to be more vigilant about it and be proactive. And the third dimension to it, as I said, is that we should play a very important role in helping the government to improve its processes. You see, the government by its very nature, its processes are designed to deal with the public at large. Okay, and public of various kinds, not necessarily the people who are very educated, learned, and well informed. Dealing with large masses of the population. Dealing with on a B2B context requires a very different set of processes. So the same process that works for an individual cannot work. If you look at our process for tax dealing, it's the same whether it is for a company or whether it is for an individual. Many of the processes are designed first for the individual and then retrofitted into a B2B context. It doesn't work. A B2B process has to be very different in terms of its character, in terms of its steps and sequences. So I think the chamber can play a very big role in helping, and because particularly we have corporations are known for standard operating processes, very rigid, very scientifically designed. I think that is one very big role that we can play in helping the government improve its processes and not just policies. And the other dimension to that is also to inculcate in the government, particularly the young bureaucrats. Now, earlier, bureaucrats came from a certain class of society. Today, it is far widely dispersed. I'm not talking of the economic sections of society. I'm talking of professional sections of society. Earlier, it was all people who came from liberal arts backgrounds, people with political science, economics, etc. Today, you have doctors, engineers, architects, various kinds of people, accountants becoming civil servants. I think they need to be, and earlier, they had to deal much less with corporate and business because it was more public life and public policy. Today, the business is a very big part of the economy and therefore there's much greater dealing. I have always been advocating that can the Bombay Chamber, for example, partner with Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration at Missouri to create some programs for the IS entrants when they're undergoing an induction program into the service. As they say, catch them young. That is the time when they're most impressionable, they're most idealistic, and they're most willing to learn. So if we can create some kind of a business appreciation program for them and work with the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, that would be a wonderful thing to make them more sensitive wherever they're posted, whether as a district magistrate or a secretary or a collector or a commissioner, to deal with businesses in a way very different than the way that they deal with an individual public. Mediation we have talked about, we're doing a lot of work, and therefore I don't want to repeat that. And this is something that we can resolve. There is institutional mediation done by commercial people and creating a win-win. The third thing that the chamber can also do is to play a big role as being the first point of contact for a large number of the medium-sized companies who are wanting to come into India, as a being their mentor, business, philosopher, and guide. This again goes back to my point that when we try and attract, so we can act as a clearinghouse, first point of contact. We can coordinate with Indian missions abroad, local consultants, global organizations, and help funnel interest. And we have a big panel of people, members, who can actually play the role of a friend, philosopher, and guide. And it could even be a paid service. In fact, we would be much cheaper than a global consulting organization. It could be, a very, very interesting way that we can actually help funnel a large amount of investments in India. Our symbol is the gateway of India. So let us live up to that symbol of being the gateway of India at the point of entry for foreign corporations. And last but not the least, closer home, I have been advocating that we should create a chamber polyclinic of advisors for our MSME companies. Again, experts, just like you go to a doctor's chamber, there's a ENT, there's a dentist, there is a cardiologist, there is a cosmetologist, there is a orthopedics. So, we can run clinic chambers where MSME companies can, for a consultation fee, just chamber consulting, take advice and inputs from experts. And, often these things can be only conversational. And if a deep dive is required, just as a doctor refers it to a radiology or a pathology, we can always refer it to a specialist tax company or a legal company. But at least the first, diagnosis of the problem. What exactly is the problem? Can it be solved only through just intervention based on wisdom and experience? Sometimes, the general practitioner, all that he gives you is paracetamol and that's it. So I think there is a big role that chambers can play to support MSME by creating a chamber polyclinic. So that's it. So all in all, I think, in every crisis, there is a seed of an opportunity. And tree plant, whether it's a mango or a datura, is our choice. So this is the time to plant mangoes. Maybe a few years from now, we will have lovely fruits. But let's not, despair over it. It's bad times, but I'm quite hopeful and optimistic that we will come out of it.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your most valuable insights. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Bombay Chamber.